Welcome to the Healthy Aging Pod. I'm Kelly Yee. You can follow me on Instagram at Kelly Yee Yoga or subscribe to my YouTube channel at Avatar Yoga. In partnership with EPC Canada, we are excited to bring you our Healthy Aging webcast series. Our discussion today is on why we fear aging rather than embracing it. Our guest today is Brenda Dineen, a registered clinical counselor with over 30 years experience in both the public and private sectors, working with both individuals and couples. She has a deep understanding and great insights into the process of aging. She helps people overcome their fears of getting older and helps them to create a vision for their life, including having good health, creating social connections, and living with a purpose. Hello, Brenda. Welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. I'm happy to be here with you, Kelly. Thank you for inviting me to be on this podcast with you.
Thank you for being here. So we're talking about the fear of aging today and why we tend to fear it versus embrace it. And one of the things is, so gerascophobia, and I hope I pronounced that properly, is the fear of aging. In your experience, what are some of the negative beliefs associated with growing older?
Well, thank you for asking me that. That's actually a really big question because there's more than one. But let me just touch on a couple of things because your listeners might be thinking, as soon as you mention fear of aging, they might have their own personal image. So one is that people often look at their parents and grandparents or previous generations and think, oh, is that how I'm going to age? And I remember my grandmother, when she was in her 70s, was, aging and kind of becoming more sedentary and had health issues. And the whole mindset then was that getting older was all downhill from here. It's all downhill from here. There's nothing upbeat. There's nothing really to look forward to. Nothing's really going to get better. And also for women especially, we're not particularly valued or had much of a place in their 70s and beyond. Now that is changing. But so just thinking about fears, people often look to, okay, what was it like in my family? Maybe I'm going to be like my mother or my grandmother. Another huge thing is the whole culture that we're living in. The culture that we're living in is very youth-centric. We're very focused on youth. We value youth. We value people who look young. And so as people are getting older and you look in the mirror, oh my gosh, I'm getting wrinkles, I've got this and that, there's a resistance. Oh my gosh, I don't want to age. I want to hold on. So there's this feeling of desperately holding on. And then with technology and science and medicine, it turns out there's products and tools and techniques to, fix your body. And so people are doing that. And we can talk about that a bit. I'm not opposed to that. People want to get Botox or there's other treatments to make yourself look young. But the most important thing is how you feel inside, how you really feel about yourself. Because if you notice in life, people that feel good about themselves, there's a glow that happens and you can sense it. So whether they have wrinkles or not, but so that feeling of comparing yourself and resisting the aging process, because we're so focused on youth. And you go to the greeting card section, if you ever look at the greeting cards in the store, and there's sort of there's lots of jokes and sarcastic comments about people being over the hill and not being so worthwhile. So how do we age? How do we get older and appreciate each stage? Because there's stages, you go through the decades, there's different stages and transitions that we go through. How do we value and appreciate each one and embrace it? That's a big thing, right? And what I want to suggest to you is it's possible to do that. It's not all doom and gloom, and it's not all downhill from here.
So you made a comment about how our culture spends a lot of time sort of on our exterior appearance and, sort of the aesthetics to remain looking youthful. And that's sort of something very key that you're kind of alluding to, that it's an exterior that we want to look youthful and stay youthful from the outside. But we know from, you know, studying aging and studying gerontology that, when we work on our inner well-being, we do feel more vibrant and youthful and happy because it starts from the inside. And when we start from the inside, it shows on the outside. So why do we tend to focus more on the aesthetics, the outside, like the makeup and now with like you said, with technology, filters and then that doesn't even look like us anymore. Like at least with makeup, then you can still look like yourself. Or we go for plastic surgery, and there's many other things that we can do. And it's not necessarily wrong. It's just, as you mentioned, how do we feel on the inside?
Yes. And yeah, so I agree with you. There's nothing really wrong with doing those things. You want to, get rid of some wrinkles or whatever, but it's really how we feel on the inside. So what is the issue here? The issue is the society that we live in. The society that we live in values youth. And so I guess what I want to suggest here, that society has only evolved to a certain level that we live in. We think of our mass culture. What are the things that are really valued are people who look and act young. And we don't really value the seniors, our elders. But the elders in society hold the wisdom, hold all the experience. You think people in their 60s, 70s, 80s and beyond have a lifetime of treasures of wisdom and knowledge and experience, and that can be passed on and shared and respected. And it tends to not be. And there are other cultures, there have been other cultures where the elders are much more respected and have a place. I'm thinking of maybe some indigenous cultures where the young people grow up totally respecting their elders and know the place of the elders, and that my grandmother or whoever the person is holds wisdom, and I look up to her and I respect her. So we don't really have that so much. And I think something that's happened during this pandemic is how we treat our elders has been totally exposed. The curtain has been drawn back, and we're looking at our long-term care homes and we're shocked. Now, it's not a new issue, but now it's being exposed and revealed, because now we're seeing that some of the homes, whether they're for profit or whatever, were poorly staffed. The virus had spread. Some of the care isn't very good. And there's been really a lot of issues. And now everybody's seeing, if they didn't see it before, oh my gosh, we have to pay some attention to this. Now, that's a whole other, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but just one aspect of how we're treating our elders. And not all cultures house their elders in separate homes like institutions. So that there are some places where that is changing, and in other cultures. But just how do we look upon our elders? Not really. They're kind of hidden away and locked away. And unless you have someone who's in a long-term care home or some kind of facility when they're older, you might not realize. Yeah.
So it definitely draws up, ageism. And you've mentioned that a few times in this very brief few minutes of our opening of our discussion. And it has exposed, I agree with you, the pandemic has exposed sort of the ageism. And you mentioned just little things. I mean, I like a great joke, but it is true that, you could go to a card store, and then see there's a lot of things about, kind of triggering our fears, I guess you can say, that relate to, getting a little older. I appreciate that you did bring up, some cultures do embrace, and have great respect for the elders. And I think that, like most people, we do respect our elders in, like, our grandparents, our great grandparents, our ancestors, the idea of, like, but when it's with ourself, to think about ourself aging, it's like almost like we separate that, like, they're there, but me, myself, now getting to that closer to their age, it feels like that's where the fears come in. Like, because it's relating now to me moving into their,
Mhm.
like, generation or age range where I felt like it was so far away, right? Like at one point, and now it doesn't seem so far. We're a little closer together. And um,
Mhm.
so what's that about? Like, what type of anxieties can be triggered when we're thinking about aging it from that respect?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point. And as people get closer, they start to realize, oh my gosh, this is happening to me. So those kind of thoughts don't happen to people when they're 20, 25, 30, usually a little bit older. And then you hit certain birthday markers like 40, 50, and then it's like, I am changing and maybe starting to look back at my life, but also looking forward, what's ahead for me. And so there's that queasy feeling, unless you feel really confident about, yes, I'm going to be really healthy, I'm going to have a really positive aging experience. There can be lots of fears of what is going to happen to me. Am I going to be okay? How am I going to take care of myself? Now, something I'd like to say is that the time to start envisioning your own aging is right now. So whether you're 35 or 40 or 50 or 60, whatever age you are, right now, think of your life right now. This is a good time to envision, what do I want my life to be like when I'm older? And so when I say older, I'm thinking of retirement and beyond. And so a lot of people now are retiring at, say, 60, or I don't know, into their 60s or 70. And what kind of life do I want then? Where am I going to be living? What is my health going to be like? And so a big factor is health. And the best way to have a really healthy aging is to be healthy right now. The baby boomers are the first generation that have exercised, like, throughout all their years, throughout their decades. My mother's generation didn't exercise, didn't go jogging, didn't go swimming regularly, didn't go to the gym, didn't have gym memberships. Well, that's really changed. My generation, the baby boomers, we have had all that in place for a long time. So I have decades of exercise in my body, decades of exercise. And you have to choose things that you enjoy and things that are age appropriate. I can't jog around Stanley Park anymore. I used to be able to jog, but I can walk and I can swim and I can go to the gym. So having a vision in place is really important. They've done some research about people who have a positive aging experience. A key factor is people's attitude. People who felt pessimistic and, oh my gosh, doom and gloom, guess what? That tended to transpose into reality. Whereas people who hold a positive vision over the years and keep saying, I'm going to make it happen, I'm going to have the resources, I'm going to invest the energy into myself, had a more positive experience of aging. And I can speak about that for myself because I'm now in my early 70s and I've had a positive view of my aging for, a few decades now. Yeah. So it does pay off. It's like our minds are very powerful. How am I going to envision my life? What am I going to have for myself? What's it going to be like?
Well, speaking to that, I know you celebrated a birthday recently, so happy belated.
Thank you.
You mentioned there's quite a few things that you've mentioned. So I'm just going to go back to you made the mention that, age comes wisdom. And one of the things that I have stressed in my promotional yoga video talking, with regards to avatar yoga, I actually say this: regardless of age or ailment, everybody can practice yoga. And this is yoga for the older body and wiser soul. And I had somebody comment that they loved the fact that I said that it's for the wiser soul. And it's essentially in alignment with what you're saying is that I agree with this. And I think maybe with age comes wisdom. For those of us that may have seen, we have grandparents that are living quite healthily, and maybe that also gives us a very different perspective. I've been fortunate to see grandparents live to a very senior age and then lived quite independently and well throughout their life. But then I've also seen those that are older than me live a life where they're still living, but maybe living with a lot of like illness and ailments. And I think that you have some very valid points there, because when you talked about perspective, you can really see the difference, because you have one person who's quite negative in their attitude, whether it's towards aging or life in general. And then you have the flip side, somebody who's living a very long life, but they're quite happy and they're always generally quite positive in their life. So how now can we sort of get people to embrace aging? I know you mentioned having, we need to think about this now, but how do we want to live our life out in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s? But how do we start to teach people that embrace where you are right now so that you can live that better life for later?
I love that point you just made. So if you're embraced your life right now, you have the experience of embracing life. I enjoy life. I'm making my life the most fulfilling I can, and I'm going to continue to have this experience as I get older. So people might be thinking, oh, well, how am I going to keep having this when I'm, 50, 60, 70? So I want to mention a couple of things. One is, have people in your life that are role models. Do you know anybody in your life, thinking to your life, either that you know personally, friends, family, or other people in the community, who are role models for you of really positive aging? Think about those people, or maybe talk to them if you can. What are they doing? What are they doing to have a really positive aging experience? Why are they feeling so fulfilled? Why is Jane Fonda feeling so fulfilled at the age of 83? Yes, I know she's wealthy and has money, but she has invested in her health and also contributing to community. She gives a lot of service to the community. So, I mean, she's just one person, but thinking into your own life, who do you look to who's a positive example of aging? The other thing I want to mention is that throughout your life, starting now, be conscious of who your support system is. That means, so in terms of friends, having people around you who are supportive, who give positive comments and feedback, who are encouraging. It's important in the quality of your life, who you have in your life. So friends and relationships, but also who's your health support system. Do you have doctor, massage therapist? Who are all those people? And be conscious of always having this body of people around you who are supporting you and encouraging you, and giving you help or guidance as you go through, the aging process. So, and then reaching out for support to yourself. Like if you're having some fears about, oh my gosh, I'm concerned about this, or what's it going to be like, reach out for support. Talk to somebody, voice your fears instead of just stuffing them down, or, bring it out into the open. What is it exactly that I'm concerned about? What am I anxious about?
There's many things that you brought up in that point. And let's actually go straight to, you know, you talked about, having a role model, which is fantastic. I totally agree with you. I mean, fortunately for me, I had like two grandmothers that were like just
Mhm.
phenomenal, strong, and
Mhm.
lived one lived into the 90s, one lives into the hundreds. So very good role models for perspective of aging.
Mhm.
And I also like, if you don't have that within your own family, that you made mention that that you can look out of your family and outside of your circle, because you can still believe that maybe Jane Fonda is your role model, and that's a great example, because she did embrace health, and she embraces her age as well, which is a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
I you also mentioned, so in addition to the role models, the support system, which is so key. And you yourself are a counselor. I see I seek counseling as well all the time, and I believe in that as a support system as well. And I love that you're addressing this, because this is kind of where the point is that you don't have to go this into these fears alone, and that there is people like you that are specializing in this area where you can speak to. And you're a great example, you're a great role model of like someone who's thriving in their 70s, living their life the way they're choosing to. And so people can actually look to you as a role model, and then in addition to that,
Mhm.
get counseling from you in
Mhm.
how they can actually reduce their fears. I mean, we're all going to have fears and insecurities about towards aging, and maybe even towards death, but we can reach out to people like you, that are counselors, and then, like you said, support system that will be positive
Mhm.
contribution to your life. So with that, maybe you can give us a brief understanding as to some of your how do you specialize in this and work with clients.
Mhm. Thank you. That's actually a big question because people come to me with such a variety. So as people are going through the aging process, I'm thinking of people, especially age 50 plus, starting to think about retirement, which is a huge transition and needs planning. 10 years before you retire, you need to be actively planning and thinking what your next stage of life is going to be. Dealing with aging parents, children growing up, becoming empty nesters, maybe downsizing your house, health issues. Sometimes marriages change, relationships change during these years. So I help people with all of those things, kind of zeroing in on what's happening in your life, what are the challenges that you're having, and what's your vision, and helping people develop a bit of a vision of what would you like your life to look like right now? What are the stumbling blocks? Sometimes people walk around with anxiety but haven't really articulated what is it that's really bothering me. And if I could name and describe that, oh, okay, that's what it is. And if I could overcome that or unpack that or deal with that in some way, what would my life be like then? So looking closely at what's happening and helping people. So I help people with like a great variety of things going through these years. Mhm. And really developing a vision of, so it's not just the problems, the aging parents, the retirement, the health issues, but what is your vision, and having a purpose. And purpose is really important. When you were in your 20s and 30s, you might not have used the word, but you had a strong sense of purpose. You were going out in the world, you were getting education, you were taking courses, maybe getting a degree, maybe getting married or having a family. There were all these things that were developing the foundation of your life, and that was your purpose then. And when you're getting older, oh, what's your purpose then? And I find, especially when people retire, not all people, some people who haven't developed a picture of, what's this new life going to be like, start to feel like they're falling off a cliff if they don't have a purpose. Some people's purpose is tied to their career, to their work. They've received a lot of fulfillment. Well, what happens when that's done? You need to step into a new stage. Oh, I'm not a such and such anymore. What am I going to be now? And I like to help people with that. Like historically, I remember many years ago when I was working in the public sector, and a couple of men that I worked with, they died at age 67 from heart attacks. And that was kind of accepted. It was kind of like, well, that's what happens. The guy died and he had nothing else to live for. And, he died. And that was kind of accepted. I don't think that mindset is accepted now, but, and so in longevity, people living a lot longer. And my grandmother's day, I don't know, people weren't expected, 100 years ago to live past 50 or 60. And now you hear every day about, you watch the evening news, oh, congratulate Gladys, she was 100 years old today, and that's not uncommon. So if you are going to be living several more decades, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, what do you want those years to be like? And how can you be living your life now and develop a vision so it's the most fulfilling life and with purpose that you can have?
So that's a great way to kind of look at it, that I agree with you. A lot of us probably don't really think about, having a vision for yourself in later in life, or even for some of us, not even in our current life, right? Like we're just kind of going with the motions versus like actually creating and developing sort of a vision. And you kind of define purpose, it sounds like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, as to the interpretation that you see people's purpose, it changes with stages and phases with their life. Whereas like I see purpose as like purpose in life, like we all kind of, there's sort of one sort of big umbrella purpose, and maybe that's sort of what you see as the vision, versus like I would use purpose as like, well, what's your purpose in life? Like, what are you meant to be here for? But, I like that you're kind of using it as the term as purpose in like, for some of us, if we have a family, if you have children, then your purpose is to be a parent to the children.
Yes.
Your
Yes.
purpose is to, you're working and you're building a foundation, and then later in life, that sort of maybe dissipates, or it starts to change, right? Your children don't need you as much. And so now what is your purpose? And that's a great way to address that, because rather than thinking about, the way I interpret purpose is like, sometimes that's way too big and grandiose and very scary for some people to try to think like, what am I here for? Whereas, yours is more in phases, and that might be a little bit easier for us to kind of digest a little. And then getting there, that's our vision, right? Like our vision for our entire life and these different stages and phases in our life. You are absolutely right. And this all falls in line with much of the research in like gerontology research, aging research, that we are living longer. Like science has brought us to this point where we're all living longer. You're an example, like you're saying, the baby boomer generation, you brought that up. Baby boomer generation is all living longer, essentially. They're quite resilient, and they are to some degree healthier than past generations.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's interesting, because do you think then that, especially with the baby boomer generation, and now that if we are accepting this, that we know that we're all going to live longer, because when we have like medical science that's helping us live longer, we tend to be healthier overall, as like, and we're talking like developed nations. How do you see how do you see maybe this baby boomer generation, because they're kind of the first generation and a very big generation, that might help to change the perspective of aging?
Mhm. Beautiful question. I love that question. So I was born after the war, and I was always aware that I was part of this baby boom. I don't know, like it was just, I grew up in the East End of Toronto, and the classes, like kindergarten, grade one, I look at the photos, like there was huge classes. There were all these kids that were born, and it was huge. And it was like that. But it wasn't just that there were a lot of kids, and a lot of families had 4 children, or maybe 3, 4, 5 kids was common back then. And the women stayed home and were housewives back in the 50s. But there was this whole mindset, and I've always identified as a baby boomer. And then throughout the decades, what have we been? We've been a very strong generation with a mindset of we can do things. We can make things change. We can change the world. We're leaders, we're confident, and we're forward thinking. And so we're carrying those mindsets. We did this back in the 60s in the anti-war movement and the women's movement and so on, and carrying on in different things over the decades. And now as we're getting older, 70s, and we'll be going into the 80s and 90s, we're still going to have those mindsets. We've taken care of our health. We've got resources. We have support systems, and we think we can do it. So, so this generation, I would say, is the first generation to have these mindsets and attitudes, you know, as a whole generation compared to, you know, say my mother's generation. And yeah, so you know, there's a lot of strength there in the baby boomers. I'm not sure how the younger people look at us. Unfortunately, sometimes there's a bit of a dichotomy, or what do they say now? Okay, boomer. I'm not sure what that means. There's kind of a little meme there in the culture. But I do hope, like, I like to learn from the younger people too. I want to learn from the millennials, because they're a very different generation and the generation younger than them. I hope there'll be a mutuality. What can we learn from each other? You know, what can we learn from each other?
You know, maybe that actually is part of it, is that what you're saying is like, you know, when we're talking, this generation has influenced a lot in our current and existing culture and our lifestyle, in sort of our views, our attitudes. And this generation too has been very much into like learning. And so maybe that also is part of that where you just mentioned, like, you know, I want to learn from the younger generation too. So it is like a mutual kind of learning. It's not just maybe a way of like millennials or the younger generation always having to look up. It's going both ways now. So we're all learning from each other. And that would actually definitely change the perspective, because it's like a mutual level of respect versus pitting against each other, right? Like one generation versus the other. Like, you know, I know more because I'm older and wiser. You might know more about technology, but it doesn't really matter, or whatever it might be. So rather than being one like against each other, where maybe it's going to be more of an amalgamation and working together and learning from each other. That's a great hope anyway. That's a great vision for us to kind of to end on. Hopefully that's what we can do. I can tell you, based on studying gerontology, there's definitely a younger audience that's very much interested in aging and learning more about aging. And these students are not the baby boomers, right? Like, these are the younger, they're just graduating or finishing high school, and they're starting university, and they're taking these courses and programs, and they're far more interested in gerontology and the aging, the process of aging, than I think ever. And so you're definitely seeing it too, because there is a shift that's happening where a lot of like universities now are actually having a program that's related to aging. So you can kind of see that shift within, I guess, the world now, because universities are doing it, which means it's reflective from what the demand is, right?
Mhm. That is that is really an important point. And you think each generation has a lot to offer, huge amounts. And yes, the millennials are different, but they've got a lot to offer. And the generation, I'm not sure of all the name, Gen Z or whatever they're called now, the next one. We all, something to be interesting would be to have some kind of a panel or a dialogue between, say, boomers and millennials or younger. And what are some of the things that we're wondering about? And what would we like to ask each other? So we enhance that feeling of mutual communication and respect and sharing together.
I do believe they definitely have that. Being part of Simon Fraser University, there's lots of sort of panel discussions because they like to look at the variations of generations. So yes, I'm sure we could probably find something somewhere, or maybe that's something I will plan for as a panel discussion, and I'll keep you posted. Well, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me with regards to, addressing this fear of aging that sometimes we end up having, and kind of changing that perspective, less fearful, and maybe thinking about it from a more positive outlook, and knowing that we can live a long, healthy, happy life. And there are great examples out there of people like yourself, and people like, even, as you mentioned, your relatives, my grandparents. Like, there's examples of like living a longer, healthier, happy life and relatively independent. So yeah, I think these beliefs that we tend to have, just sometimes we need to figure out what it is really that's triggering it, and then hopefully we can, you know get support, maybe take in some counseling, and then move past it, so that we can keep ourselves feeling very vibrant and as youthful as our ages.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think conversations like this, what you're doing, are really, really valuable, because you're bringing out into the surface, out into the open, issues that people are thinking about. So I want to thank you for hosting this, because I think that people who are watching are going to receive some value from this.
Thank you, Brenda. Do you have any final thoughts for everyone?
Yeah, I just want to say, find ways to overcome any kind of fears, or like pinpoint or name some of your fears or anxieties, and find ways to bring that out into the open and to get support, so that there's ways to overcome those, and to develop a positive vision. And so a counselor can help you with that. Other people can help you with that. What is the vision of my life? And now that, say, looking at even the next decade, like if you're 40, 70 is like, whoa, that's a long way away. But, just sort of planning for your future. And yeah, I think there's lots of possibilities. Yeah, so I want to to say to each person to ask, what is possible in my life? Yes.
I love that. Thank you so much, Brenda.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you.